There is a moment that arrives without warning, usually when the stakes are highest, when your mind speaks with absolute certainty and everything inside you wants to believe it. The voice feels familiar, intimate, even protective. It sounds like reason. It sounds like experience. It sounds like you. And yet, if you trace the biggest mistakes of your life backward with enough honesty, you may discover that many of them began with that very voice insisting it knew what was best. This is not a story about intelligence or logic or even wisdom. It is a story about trust and about the dangerous comfort of believing that the brain, simply because it is loud and fast and convincing, must also be right. Picture a quiet room late at night, the kind of silence that amplifies your own thoughts until they feel heavier than the furniture around you. The day is over. The world has stopped asking things of you, and now your mind takes the stage. It replays conversations, predicts futures, assigns meaning to moments that were never meant to carry that much weight. It tells you why you should stay where you are, why you should hesitate, why that risk is foolish, why that opportunity is probably a trap. And because this voice lives inside your skull, because it uses your memories and your language, it feels trustworthy. It feels like an ally. But what if, in the moments that matter most, it is not guiding you towards safety, but towards stagnation? The brain evolved to keep you alive, not to make you fulfilled. Long before dreams, ambitions, and self-actualization entered the human vocabulary, survival was the only metric that mattered. Avoid danger, conserve energy, stick with what is familiar. These instincts did not fade when the world changed. They were simply repurposed. Today, the threats are rarely physical, but the brain reacts as if they are. A difficult conversation becomes a lion in the grass. A career leap becomes a cliff edge. Emotional vulnerability becomes exposure to predators. And so the brain does what it has always done best. It constructs convincing narratives to keep you exactly where you are. What makes this especially dangerous is how reasonable these narratives sound. They are not frantic or chaotic. They are calm, measured, and often framed as concern. You don't think, "I am afraid." You think, "This isn't the right time." You don't think, "I'm avoiding rejection." You think, "I should be realistic." The brain rarely announces its true motive. Instead, it disguises fear as logic, hesitation as wisdom, and avoidance as patience. And because these disguises align so neatly with how adults are supposed to think, they pass through without resistance. There is a particular cruelty in this process because the brain uses your own past against you. It remembers every time you failed, every time you were embarrassed, every time hope did not pay off. It catalogs pain with remarkable precision, not to help you heal, but to help you avoid repetition. When a new opportunity appears, the brain does not evaluate it on its own terms. It overlays it with old wounds, old outcomes, old disappointments, and then declares a verdict that feels informed, but is actually contaminated. You believe you are making a rational decision, when in truth you are reliving an emotional memory. This is why critical moments often feel so heavy. It is not the decision itself that weighs you down, but the internal courtroom that convenes around it. Every argument is presented with confidence. Every doubt is supported by evidence. And because all of this happens internally, without external challenge, the loudest voice wins by default. The brain does not ask for permission to take control. It simply does, especially when uncertainty enters the room. Think about the times when you stood on the edge of change. Maybe it was leaving a relationship that had grown quiet and hollow, or staying because leaving felt too disruptive. Maybe it was saying yes to something that scared you, or saying no because safety felt easier to justify. In those moments, your brain likely offered you a detailed forecast of everything that could go wrong. It showed you images of regret, instability, loss, and it probably felt irresponsible not to listen. After all, ignoring such warnings would seem reckless. But what if the recklessness was not in moving forward, but in assuming that fear deserved the final word? The brain is exceptionally good at predicting danger, but remarkably poor at predicting growth. It has no reliable model for transformation, because transformation requires stepping into the unknown. There is no data set for the version of you that does not exist yet, and so the brain fills the gap with the only material it has, the past. This is why it struggles most at the precise moments when intuition, courage, and values matter more than analysis. When the path ahead cannot be mapped, the brain defaults to retreat. This becomes most evident under pressure. When time is limited, when consequences feel permanent, when eyes are on you, the brain tightens its grip. It speeds up, narrows focus, and reduces options. Complexity collapses into false binaries: safe or dangerous, smart or stupid, success or failure. Nuance disappears. And in that compressed mental space, the easiest choice is often the one that minimizes immediate discomfort, not the one that serves your deeper life. You might recognize this pattern in moments of silence too. When nothing external is happening, when there is no crisis to solve, the brain grows restless. It scans for problems, invents threats, reopens unresolved questions. Silence feels unsafe because it offers no distraction from internal noise. And so the brain fills it with commentary, judgments, and warnings. It becomes difficult to tell the difference between insight and anxiety, between intuition and habit. There is a quiet tragedy in how often people mistake familiarity for truth. Because a thought repeats itself does not make it accurate. Because a belief has been with you for years does not mean it deserves to stay. The brain is a pattern machine. It repeats what has worked before, even if what worked simply meant avoiding pain rather than building meaning. Over time, these patterns harden into identity. You stop hearing thoughts as suggestions and start hearing them as facts about who you are and what is possible for you. But there are cracks in this system. Moments when something feels off. A sense that despite doing everything right, something essential is missing. A quiet envy when you see someone take a leap you talked yourself out of. A dull ache that surfaces not during chaos, but during stability. These feelings are often dismissed as ingratitude or restlessness, but they may be signals that your brain has been steering for safety while your deeper self has been asking for something else. It is uncomfortable to consider that the voice you have trusted most might not always have your best interests at heart. Not because it is malicious, but because it is limited. The brain cannot see who you could become, only who you have been. It cannot feel meaning, only measure risk. And when you ask it to make decisions about love, purpose, or courage, it answers with tools designed for survival, not for living. There comes a moment, often subtle, when you realize that the cost of listening unquestioningly has grown too high. The cost is not always dramatic. Sometimes it is measured in years that pass quietly, in opportunities that fade without closure, in versions of yourself that remain hypothetical. And it is in this realization that a new question begins to form, one that changes the nature of decision-making itself. Not, what does my brain think is safest? But, what would I choose if fear were not pretending to be logic? This question does not silence the brain. It does not need to. The goal is not to eliminate fear, but to reposition it. Fear is information, not instruction. It can tell you that something matters, that the stakes are real, that the outcome is uncertain, but it cannot tell you what is right. That authority belongs elsewhere, in a quieter place that does not shout, does not argue, and does not rush. Learning to stop trusting your brain when it matters most does not mean acting impulsively or recklessly. It means recognizing when analysis has crossed the line into avoidance. It means noticing when caution has become a habit rather than a response. It means understanding that clarity does not always arrive before action, and that waiting for complete certainty is often another way of choosing not to choose. There is a different kind of intelligence that emerges when you stop demanding guarantees from the future. It is slower, less articulate, but more honest. It speaks through tension rather than words, through alignment rather than argument. You feel it when a choice resonates, even as it scares you, when something feels true, even without evidence. This intelligence cannot compete with the brain in speed or volume. but it has a depth the brain cannot reach. And this is where the real shift begins, not in silencing the mind, but in changing who gets the final say. The brain can present its case, list its risks, and warn you of consequences, but the verdict no longer belongs to it alone. In the moments that matter most, when your life is being shaped by decisions that will echo forward, you learn to pause, to feel beneath the noise, and to choose from a place that understands that safety is not the same as fulfillment. Because the most dangerous lie the brain tells is not that you will fail, but that you must be certain before you begin. And once you see that lie for what it is, once you notice how often it has kept you standing still, you begin to understand that trusting your brain less is not an act of defiance, but an act of maturity. It is the moment you stop outsourcing your life to fear dressed up as reason and start listening for something truer, something quieter, something that has been waiting patiently beneath the noise all along. There is a strange relief that comes when you finally admit this to yourself. Not relief because the answers suddenly appear, but relief because the pressure to be perfectly logical begins to loosen. You realize that you have been asking your brain to do a job it was never designed to do. You have been asking it to justify leaps of faith, to quantify meaning, to calculate fulfillment as if it were a spreadsheet. And when it couldn't, you assumed the problem was you, that you were indecisive, weak, broken, or somehow behind everyone else. But the truth is simpler and far less personal. You were listening to the wrong authority at the wrong moment. Think about how often you've waited for your mind to feel ready. Ready to leave, ready to start, ready to speak, ready to risk. And notice how that readiness rarely arrives on its own. The brain keeps moving the goalpost, demanding more information, more reassurance, more certainty. It promises that once everything makes sense, once the fear dissolves, once the doubt is gone, then you'll act. But that day almost never comes, because fear is not a glitch in the system. It is the system doing exactly what it was built to do. This is why so many people wake up one day with the unsettling realization that their life feels smaller than it should. Not because they lacked intelligence or opportunity, but because they followed logic into every corner of their existence, even the places where logic could not lead them anywhere new. They made decisions that were defensible, reasonable, explainable to others, and slowly, without a single dramatic mistake, they traded aliveness for coherence. The most painful part is that the brain will always have an argument ready. If you stay, it will tell you why leaving would have been foolish. If you leave, it will tell you why staying would have been safer. It is not committed to your growth or your stagnation. It is committed to reducing uncertainty. And uncertainty is the raw material of every meaningful transformation. When you understand this, you stop treating discomfort as a signal that something is wrong and start seeing it as evidence that something important is happening. There is a moment, often quiet and deeply internal, when you begin to notice the difference between fear and misalignment. Fear is sharp, insistent, urgent. It demands immediate resolution. Misalignment is heavier, slower, and more patient. It doesn't scream. It lingers. It shows up as exhaustion that sleep doesn't fix, as success that feels oddly hollow, as a constant sense that you are performing a version of your life rather than inhabiting it. The brain is excellent at silencing this feeling because acknowledging it would require change, but it never fully disappears. Underneath all the noise, there is a deeper intelligence that does not argue with you. It doesn't try to convince you. It simply waits. It waits through years of overthinking, through cycles of avoidance, through countless rationalizations. And when you finally stop trying to think your way out of a decision, it becomes perceptible. Not as a clear plan, but as a direction. Not as certainty, but as clarity of values. You may not know how things will unfold, but you begin to know what you can no longer ignore. This is often the point where people say they are listening to their gut, though that phrase barely captures what is happening. It is less instinct and more alignment, a recognition that some choices feel wrong not because they are dangerous, but because they are dishonest. dishonest to what you want, to what you feel, to who you are becoming. And once you sense this, it becomes increasingly difficult to unsee it. The brain may continue to protest, but its arguments start to sound rehearsed, familiar, recycled. Trusting something deeper than your brain does not mean rejecting thought altogether. It means using thought as a tool, not a ruler. You let the brain analyze logistics, anticipate obstacles, and plan steps, but you no longer let it decide the destination. That decision comes from a place that understands cost differently, a place that knows the cost of regret, of self-betrayal, of living a life that looks good on the outside but feels constrained on the inside. There is courage in this shift, but it is a quiet kind of courage. Not the dramatic kind that announces itself, but the steady kind that shows up again and again. The courage to act without guarantees. The courage to disappoint expectations, including your own. The courage to accept that growth will involve loss, confusion, and moments of deep discomfort. The brain will label these outcomes as failures. Something deeper will recognize them as tuition. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, the relationship with your mind begins to change. You still hear its warnings, but they no longer paralyze you. You still feel fear, but it no longer decides for you. Decisions become less about proving something and more about honoring something. You stop asking, "What is the safest option?" and start asking, "What choice allows me to respect myself tomorrow?" This does not lead to a life without mistakes. In fact, it often leads to more visible ones. But they are mistakes made in motion, not in hiding. They teach instead of calcify. They expand instead of shrink. And even when they hurt, they carry a strange sense of rightness, because they came from a place of honesty rather than avoidance. At some point, you may look back and realize that the moments you feared most were also the moments that clarified you, not because they ended perfectly, but because they forced you to show up fully. They demanded presence instead of prediction. And in those moments, you weren't being led by a brain desperate for control, but by something willing to be alive inside uncertainty. This is what it means to stop trusting your brain when it matters most. Not to abandon it, but to recognize its limits. To understand that the mind is a brilliant servant, but a poor master. And when you finally allow it to take its proper place, when you stop asking it to protect you from every possible outcome, you create space for a life that is not merely survived, but truly lived. Because in the end, the greatest risk is not making the wrong decision. The greatest risk is letting fear, dressed as intelligence, quietly choose your life for you, while you tell yourself you're being reasonable.